Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm going to give my quick first impressions of the Old King's Crown. Specifically this solo mode, since that's the only way I've played. I've made a full solo playthrough on the channel, so please go check that out. In this discussion, I'm going to assume you've watched that video, or you at least understand how the game is played. Now I want to start off with something that should be obvious. The Old King's Crown is primarily a multiplayer game. Solo is not going to be the best way to play. I don't think that should surprise anybody. But that doesn't mean that the solo mode isn't worth playing or that the solo experience isn't great. Quite the opposite. And I wanted to highlight that because the Old King's Crown is a type of game that even just a couple of years ago would never have gotten a solo mode. Designers and publishers in the past, the thought wouldn't have even crossed their minds to try to make a solo mode for a game this interactive, where you have mechanisms like bluffing and direct conflict and loads of player and card powers. At its heart, the Old King's Crown is a lane battler, right? It's just a very fancy, souped-up version of one. I can only think of one other lane battler with a solo mode off the top of my head, and that's Sky Tier Horde. I've actually made a full solo playthrough for Sky Tier Horde Monoliths, not that long ago, a couple years back, so you can always go check that out. But the vast majority of this type of game, probably like 90% of them, are two-player only games. So I think it's a big deal to even have a solo mode on a game like this in the first place. And not only does the Old King's Crown have a solo mode, it has one co-designed by the one and only Ricky Royal from Box of Delights. Ricky is a great designer who cares about solo play, and this solo mode has to be one of his best. I think it's a brilliant solo mode. I honestly can't imagine how it could be better. And for me, that means this is just another nail in the coffin of that ignorant talking point about how some games don't have the design space for a solo mode. I've heard this silly excuse from so many people in the industry, some who I respect, some who I don't. Well, as we've seen time and time and time again, it turns out all you need is a talented designer and a publisher who cares. And lo and behold, they're able to create excellent solo experiences from nearly any genre of game. Sorry, I just like to make that point whenever I can. So let's get into the details of the game, and let's start with another obvious thing, which is this is one of the most gorgeous games I've ever seen. The artwork is incredible. It has a really specific feel. It's also detailed. It makes the world that the game creates feel very lived in. It was almost like I was exploring this world with every new flip of a card. I think that speaks to the power of this artwork. Now, I did notice a comment on my video which said that the board seemed to look kind of busy. For me personally, that wasn't the case, like looking at it in real life. I can see why maybe that would be a problem, but honestly, because of the nature of the game, in that big part of the middle of the board, you're just putting out tokens. You have these big cards that are easy to read. The board was not a problem. The only problem I really had was that Great Road with those kingdom cards. It was a little far away, so it was hard for me to read those kingdom cards. I would have to bring them close and look at them. But that's only 4 cards. You can easily pass those around the table at the beginning of each round. So I don't see that as being a big deal. And also the components, they're great. Nice chunky wood. Everything is fantastic. No complaints whatsoever. And as I said, I think the design of the solo mode is one of the best that I've seen. It's brilliant, and this was not an easy task. Creating a compelling solo mode for this game had to have been a difficult, challenging project, just because of the nature of this kind of game. And there's a few things that really make the Simulacrum work. First is the brilliant design of the ambition and the scheme decks. Each one gives you a little bit of information on the back before you turn them over, and you really can use that to inform your decisions. I think you saw that in the playthrough. But more than that, the fact that the scheme deck might be bluffing, it might be giving you the wrong information, that is so good. I mean, you saw in the playthrough how that can really affect your plans. It breeds true paranoia, and it gives you that decision whether to push your luck or to cover your bases. It also really works well to have their faction cards tiered, right? You have that gold, silver, and bronze tier. Once again, it gives you a little bit of information, not enough to fully know what's going to happen. And it just works. You know, if all of these cards were just completely random and you had no way of anticipating what might be coming, it would feel too chaotic. That wouldn't be fun to play. The decisions just wouldn't matter, right? This little bit of insight, the little bit of bluffing, that really does make all the difference. And then in addition to that, you have that threat deck. That adds so much extra tension that you need, but it also adds variety to every round and every play. You're literally just using 6 of those fog cards per game, and there's a pretty good stack of those. So every game you're going to have, a different set of these threat cards, and they add so much to the round. For a game like this that, is meant to be played with other people, and you're meant to have other people to sort of bounce off of, when you're playing solo, you need that little extra something, right, to juice it up. It's one of the brilliant things that Voidfall did. And those threats, that's the extra juice. And it works. It's perfect. But then this game goes the extra mile, and it doesn't just give you one simulacrum to play against at like different difficulty levels. No, it gives you a bunch of simulacra at different difficulty levels, but that also have different personalities, using these forge cards. And the fact that, you can use these pre-built ones, or you can even create random ones or like hand create your own. That's very unique. I cannot remember seeing anything quite like this. I have to admit, I haven't actually done this, right? So I can't speak from experience as to exactly how that goes, but it's definitely something I want to try. And just reading over it, looking at all the options, it looks like it's going to dramatically affect the game. I really do think that it takes a game where playing solo, it could get a little repetitive after a while. It might have sort of a below average replayability, but because you have all these different simulacra that you can play against, I do think that jumps the replayability way up. And then in addition to that, you have, the 4 different factions, which have, a unique deck of cards, unique traits and abilities. I think all of that is fantastic. But the question is, would I recommend this just for solo play? And my answer is yes, absolutely. If you like this kind of direct, in-your-face conflict, if you like this kind of take that card play, this lane battling sort of thing, if that's a style of game that you really enjoy, then I would highly recommend this, even just for solo play. If that's not something that you enjoy so much, and you're a little bit more like I am, and you like more indirect interaction, right? You prefer these more multiplayer solitaire Euros, especially when you're playing solo, then this might not necessarily be for you. I can definitely see some people arguing that the Old King's Crown takes a lane battler, and many of them are very simple, and it adds more complexity. All these different little steps that you have to go through, and that maybe that's not adding enough to justify the added time and rules and all that kind of stuff. And I don't personally agree with that take, but I can understand that. My experience was that after a few plays, the rules became much easier to grasp, and the game started to flow better. At first, it was really kind of janky with all the different steps and, bouncing back and forth between the solo and my turn. After a while, that went away and it became much quicker and easier to run. And the solo opponent at the end of the day is not very complicated. The worst part about it is that the bonuses that it gets are slightly different than the bonuses that you get. And so I was always, having to go back to the sheet and consult it. But you have a really great player aid that lays it all out. After a while, you internalize it and it makes a lot more sense. But if you're used to playing lane battlers like, Battle Line or something like that, this has a lot more bells and whistles added on. And some of it can feel a little, disjointed. I think I've rambled on for long enough. those are a few of my initial thoughts about the Old King's Crown. In summary, I really like it. It's not really like my favorite genre of game, and it's not one that I would choose most of the time, especially if I'm playing solo. So it's kind of a weird fit for me personally, but I can see this becoming some people's favorite solos. It's that good. So there you go. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.